Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Design Beyond Pixels. This is a series of podcasts that will allow design leaders across the US and Europe to discuss topics completely chosen by them. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Leffel. Ryan, thanks so much for joining me today. Can you please
Thanks,
just give
Ryan.
us, yeah, can you please just give us a short intro into yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Ryan Leffel. I am the head of design at Priceline. I have been at Priceline since September of 2019, so just 4 or 5 months before the pandemic hit. I oversee the product design, brand design, and user research teams at Priceline. Started off in the industry really in the late 90s as a developer and quickly pivoted into design, went to graduate school at NYU, which kind of helped me land my first role at RGA in the early 2000s. And that brought me to Yahoo, spent quite a bit of time at Yahoo, pivoted careers, opened up a gym, transitioned back into the design world. I spent time at agencies and brands and, here I'm now at Priceline and it's been great.
Awesome. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
look, thanks for the intro.
sure.
Now, this podcast is obviously going to be slightly different to many you may see. I'm giving my guests the full ownership of what we discussed during their episodes. Now, Ryan obviously gave you the task of picking the topics that you wanted to go over and discuss today before we jumped on. So, can you just please share with the guests exactly what we'll be talking about in today's episode?
Yeah, I think hopefully relevant themes for today, talking about landing your first job as a designer, talking a little bit about just how to think about getting promoted, transitioning careers for people who are interested in jumping from one career to another, particularly into design, and also building motivated teams.
Yeah, yeah. Look, thanks very much for putting together the topics. I think they're two very relevant topics in today's landscape. Um, and yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to cover off some really interesting things during this talk. But yeah, look, obviously you wanted to talk about getting started in design. It'd be great to hear a little bit more about your story initially. I know you said you were a developer once, but yeah, tell us a little bit more about in terms of your start of your career in design.
Sure. So for me, it was kind of interesting. So I wanted to be a developer. I started doing, learning some front end stuff. Actually, started learning a bit in college, um, and thought that's what I wanted to do. Although I always kind of knew there was something about design that I was really interested in, and it was like really hard to focus on both. The lesson I learned pretty quickly is I was a bad developer.
Yeah.
Right, I just wasn't good at it, and
Yeah.
and I knew that, like, it would take me 4 hours to do something, and then person
Yeah.
sitting next to me done in, like, 15 minutes. It's like, "Okay, this isn't my thing," but
Yeah.
I was really interested in how things were put together and why, and how we were communicating business value to the customer, and so that really brought me into thinking about, okay, like, user experience is where I should be. So I started spending more time on design and UX and research, and that led me to the interactive telecommunications program at NYU, where I really focused my time there on user experience and research, but I also took classes in programming because what I realized early on is if you want to be a really good designer, you should understand how things are put together and know how to talk to and communicate with the developer. So that's really where I focused. I got a little bit lucky. My thesis advisor was a guy named Bob Greenberg, who was the founder of RGA, which is a large
Yeah.
digital agency. So coming out of the thesis, he said, I want to introduce you to a few people at the company. I'm just going to open a door for you and it's on you to do the rest. And
Yeah.
that turned into a job. And spent a little over five years there. And I feel like that's where I really started to, I've learned a ton. I worked with incredibly creative people who were really smart and just, great mentors, people to learn from. And that really helped me grow up as a designer. I spent 5 years there. I started as an associate designer. I left as a director, and wanted to see what life was like as a designer outside of an agency, and
Yeah.
that brought me to Yahoo.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think there's always a little bit of luck somewhere along the line, isn't there? um
It's
it's a
always
lot.
when you don't expect it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's always,
always
I think it always goes back to the saying who it's about who you know, not what you know, right? And yeah, it's true in this case for sure. Of course, not neglecting any of your skills and what you're capable of, but yeah, obviously knowing the founder of RGA probably helped in that transition into that role a little bit. Um, but no, agencies, it's a lot of designers I speak to commonly may start out there. It's a great way to experience diverse industries, diverse projects within different spaces. I think a lot of agency designers, as they become more senior, maybe it's the same with yourself, Ryan, but as they become a little bit more senior and they're there for a little while, they do want to experience what it's like to be part of a real end-to-end experience within an in-house product team. I'm not sure if that resonates with you or that's why you ultimately decided to move on from an agency, but yeah, I mean, I've heard it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just, I mean, it was 5 years and I was still pretty young in my career. And
Yeah,
I just wanted to try something new, experience something different. Like I felt like I got agency.
yeah,
And one of the nice things about agency is you get to work on a variety
yeah,
of different clients. You typically get to work on some, a lot of times clients are coming to you for just more innovative and outside of the
yeah,
box thinking. So that was always fun to be a part of. But really, it was, what's life like as a designer when you're working for a brand and you're more focused on one particular thing,
yeah,
and the stakeholders you're working with are people who are on your team and in the same company. I just wanted to experience that. And if anything,
yeah,
I'll do it for a few years and learn, and then I have some agency experience and brand experience, and then I can make a decision about
yeah,
what's gonna come next. I mean, ultimately, after that, I've gone back to agencies and I've gone back to brands. Now I'm on the brand side, and I feel like I really like it, and I really like being in product.
yeah,
Right, we're in e-commerce, and I love the e-commerce space, and I kind of feel like I've learned all these things as I moved along. Brand and focusing on product and how do you design and develop for product. I love it. I think it's super interesting, and I really like the
yeah,
e-commerce space. So that's where I've decided I want to be focused. But it was kind of those lessons along the way that helps you get there. And I would certainly, to me, I wouldn't trade my time at an agency for anything. I would advise any designer who's just starting out, spend time at an agency,
yeah,
spend time at a brand, and figure out where you want to go from there, because you learn very different things
yeah,
in both of those different setups.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's great advice, especially for designers early on in their career. As you said, it's a long journey, a long career, right?
Yeah,
And at agencies, you do get to experience a lot of different projects, as we said, a versatile array of industries, companies at different stages, and then you can make your mind up and decide where you go from there. It's not
absolutely.
potentially it's not ultimately what you'll end up doing in the long run anyway. But at least you've got that experience, and it can set the at least the building blocks, the stepping stones for you to continue on the way you potentially want to at that point. Now, look, I know
100%.
you obviously wanted to discuss a little bit more about the getting started in design, potentially pivoting in design from other industries as well. But let's start with the getting started in design
Yeah,
firstly. Now, I think it's quite apparent and it's quite obvious. It always has been, I think, but generally now it's very difficult for juniors coming out of college, coming out of university, wherever it may be, to land their first job in design. Because obviously tech has been going through a tough time recently.
yeah,
There's a
sure.
lot if there is demand for design, a lot of it is more leaning towards senior individual contributors, or I think most commonly individual contribution and potential design managers who are
Sure.
still hands-on. Right now, I'd say that's where the market is. But yeah, look, I wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit more in terms of what tips you have for young designers, young people coming through the ranks, looking to land their first role in design.
Sure. So I think there's a few things that I would recommend or think about. First is don't get wrapped up on brand names, and don't put too much focus or emphasis on one single company. And I understand why some people coming out of school do that, and I think it's great if you can land your first design job at a company that really motivates you and inspires you and is kind of the dream place to be. That's fantastic. But it's to me, it's not about that. It's about the opportunity. And I think your first job is about learning and growing. And I think good things are gonna come from there. And I think it's more about finding a place where you can go and you're talking to a hiring manager during the interview process, and that's somebody who you feel like you can really learn from and you feel like you have a connection with. That's the important thing, and that's more important than a particular, a focus on a particular brand or
Yeah,
company.
yeah,
um the next thing is, and I just kind of alluded to this a little bit, but if you're in a position where you meet somebody who you think is a really good hiring manager and they seem really interested in you and helping you learn and helping you grow, and they're at a company that you're not that excited about, and you meet somebody who you're not sure if they're going to be a good manager and they don't seem that interested in you and they're just kind of trying to fill the role, but they're at this big brand that you're really excited
Yeah.
about. I would go with the good hiring manager 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for younger designers to understand and to think about.
Yeah.
I think confidence is really important. We've all had first jobs. So
Yeah.
going for an interview at a company that's going to be your first place, there's no reason to try to talk ahead of that. We've all been there. We've all started out, right? You're not expected to know everything.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking for your first job in design, you're really expected to show a willingness to learn and
Yeah.
to want to collaborate. And I think that's what has to come through most during the interview process. I think sometimes people get really caught up in over talking
Yeah.
about things that they don't really have that much experience
Mm.
doing.
Yeah.
Another piece of advice that I give to people is don't just be in the crowd. You want to stand out from the crowd. There's a lot of people coming out of school now who have design training, and there's a lot of people coming out of boot camps, and a lot of these portfolios look the same, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It showcases your work, but a lot of it looks the same. And I would challenge people to think about how can you elevate your portfolio? How can you elevate your personal brand? And I think there's a few pieces to that. One, it's not only about the projects you did in school. Find a company that inspires you, find a product that inspires you and that you really like, and identify what you see as a user problem and take it upon yourself to go through a design thinking process, a research
Yeah.
process, and put together a solution to that problem. Even though it's not a commissioned piece of work, even though you didn't work there, that's totally cool. I think when you go in and interview and say, here are things I've worked on in school, and
Yeah.
company XYZ, I love this company, but I see a big problem with something they're doing.
Yeah.
And here's how I would solve that problem if I worked
Yeah.
there. That shows initiative. It shows thinking ahead. It shows how you approach a problem, and it shows how you think about design. And I think that is really important. The other piece of it is when you put your portfolio together, right? Think, and not only your portfolio, but your portfolio, when you put your resume together, when you sound out a cover letter, what is your personal brand? How do you want to sound? How do you want to
Yeah.
communicate to other people? And I think that is also really important. You see a lot of designers come in really loud and expressive with colors and fonts, and
Yeah.
that kind of paints a picture of what your personal brand is. I advise people it's a very subjective thing. Keep it simple.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think they're both great pieces of advice, to be honest. And I think the first one in particular stood out to me. Because I've heard it so often, to be honest. So many hiring managers said the same things. When we're looking at more junior to mid-level, even mid-level positions, just portfolios look so identical and so similar. It's very difficult to pick out, who's really going to stand out or who's just following a template that they learned in the boot camp or they learned
Yeah,
in
right.
school, right? And I think it's great advice to take initiative. Everyone who wants to become, get into design, more than likely, probably 99 times out of 100, they're going to have a product, they're going to have a company, they're going to have an app that they use and love and why they love it and things like that. And doing a quick case on that to identify a potential problem that they see, even to go as far as maybe interviewing some of their friends, as user interviews or something like that, right? To do some really early stage, really introductory research into the usage of the app and the problem, and they can build a case from there. It's such a great piece of advice because it does, it shows thinking outside the box. It shows your ability to identify a problem with a product you're not actually even familiar with, and how you deal with that and solve that, and how you'd potentially theorize a solution for it as well. So I think it's great advice for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I love what you said. I mean, you're talking to friends and family and getting feedback on something you're working
Yeah.
on. It's a creative way to approach a problem.
Yeah.
I found people who are users of this product, and I know them and I talk to them. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. In terms of interviews, I know you mentioned that very briefly during your description of, obviously, graduates or people coming into their first job interview. As you said, everyone's had a first job, everyone's had a first interview. I think I completely agree with you as well. I think it's super important that you show your ability and enthusiasm to learn more so than trying to explain or give more details on things, as you mentioned, that you don't really understand in full detail. If you've had no full working experience in a specific area, probably just don't attempt to do that. As much research as you've done, as much things you've been Googling before the interview,
Yeah.
I think it's important that I think it's important that you give you're honest and you give your level of understanding about certain things, because look, if you're a graduate and you're coming into your first role, as you said, no one is expecting you to know everything about everything. If you did, you'd be worrying that you're applying for a graduate role.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
the expectation of what you're looking for as a hiring manager changes based on level and years of experience of the
yeah,
person you've talked to.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, I just think, showing your curiosity, showing your empathy for the situation, empathy for the hiring manager's situation, asking curious questions about existing problems, things that are live to them, that they're as a team they're perhaps struggling with or they're dealing with right now, and perhaps giving input into that as much as you can. Of course, I don't expect you to necessarily understand fully, but if you've got creative ideas, creative thinking, or if you've got ideas that they have already think of, they can it shows that you're on the same page. It shows you're willing to put forward your ideas and be confident. But again, you're showing that curiosity, you're showing those questions to learn more about and show that you're willing to learn. But yeah, I think it's great advice. I hope people take it on board. And also, I think I did a post about this on LinkedIn recently. It was more tailored towards, I'd say, more senior people and people in leadership roles at the minute, but just in terms of creating more of a strategy around your approach to positions that you're applying for at the minute.
Sure.
I think when you're looking at graduates, obviously you've got passions, you've got real interests, but I think you have to be a little more, and I think everyone generally has to be a little bit more flexible in terms of what they're open to and what they're looking for right now. I've spoken to so many designers since I've been a design recruiter, and it's so often that people say, when I initially talked about a role that I'm in now, it didn't massively scream out to me, or when I saw it posted on LinkedIn, it didn't scream out to me as something
Yeah.
super appealing. But once I got to speak to the people, learn a bit more about the team, the culture, the actual depth of the problem space they're working in, that's what sort of drew me in. And I think that's what you just have to do right now, is just have a complete open mind, have as many conversations
Yeah.
as you can, and keep networking as much as you can too.
Yeah. I mean, you never know what a situation is going to be until you learn about
Yeah,
that situation. And
yeah,
taking an hour out of your day, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, to have that conversation is
yeah,
nothing. If it turns out to not be the right thing, then
yeah,
that's that. And you learn something. There is one other thing that I think is really important, and I don't think people talk about this enough, but when you're interviewing, it like be human.
yeah,
I think it's really important because sometimes people are just, I'm just going to come in and talk about what I've done.
yeah,
I think how are you? How's your week been?
yeah,
What any plans this weekend? Like we do portfolio reviews as part of our design
yeah,
process. We'll get key players from the team and cross-functional teams, and people will come together, and somebody has 45 minutes to come in and present 2 or 3 projects you've worked on and talk about some of the challenges you face, how you solve those problems. A red flag to me is always when somebody comes into a portfolio review, the floor is yours. My first project is this. Right? It's like I want somebody to come and be like, "Hey, I'm so and so. These are my
yeah,
hobbies. This is what I like to do when
yeah,
I'm not at work." Like take some time to set up yourself as
yeah,
a person, show you who you are as a human being,
yeah,
because it kind of helps sets a mood in the
yeah,
room, and it helps you connect with people. And chances are, like, hey, like this is a show I'm watching right now on Netflix. Somebody else in there's probably like
yeah,
into the same
yeah,
thing. It's like so now you have that connection for them.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And it sets you up to be in a much more friendly space when you actually start talking about your work.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely 100% agree. I think, yeah, look, there's certain levels of pressure that people feel in interview scenarios. I think, especially when there's more people on the other side to you, if it's a 3-on-1 situation, of course, it's daunting no matter what the situation is. But great advice, Ryan. Big thing that I try and get everyone to do is not. I always say it's not stalking, but just have a quick look at the LinkedIn profiles of the people that you're going to be speaking to. See, where they went to school. See, what they've been posting on LinkedIn recently. See if you know anyone that they know. It's just about trying to
Yeah.
build
Yeah.
much bigger sense of familiarity, rapport straight away, and just creating more of a relaxed tone to the interview as soon as you possibly can. Because the more you keep it a more of a nervy sort of tense tone, it becomes
Yeah.
much more difficult to then start break those barriers. If you create a more relaxed environment as quickly as you can, then you become more relaxed, but then also the interviews feel more relaxed. And of course, they're not just, you're not just reviewing people for their technical skills, you're also reviewing them for a cultural fit in the team. And if they come in and don't ask how anyone is, or even try and attempt to speak to anyone initially, then it's
Yeah.
always, as you said, it's a
Yeah.
red flag potentially initially. But cool. Next thing I just wanted to cover off, Ryan, really was the no. We've obviously discussed how people could land their first jobs, what to do, some advice there. Now let's move on to people who are in existing jobs right now. So at any level, particularly, it could be IC, could be design managers looking to land their first director role, wherever it might be. What's your advice around dealing with and handling promotions right now?
So I think when you're first starting off, and you mentioned something similar to this earlier, but when you're first starting off, it's time. You have a
Yeah,
lot of time, right? And that's the most important thing. And be patient. I think a lot of times designers come in out of boot camps, or they come in and they at a very junior level, and after 6 months, it's I want to be promoted,
yeah,
right? And I always encourage spend time in the role and learn as much as you can. Use that time wisely and embrace the opportunity. Now, that being said, I do think it's important to advocate for yourself, because I think one of the biggest mistakes designers, probably even if you're not a designer, like anyone
yeah,
who's out there professionally working, and I know I've been guilty of this myself. It's something I historically haven't been great at, but you should advocate for yourself. And I think it's easy to make the assumption that I come in every day, I work hard, and I'm doing really good work. Somebody's gonna look at that and say, "Hey, like
yeah.
we're gonna promote you," and it doesn't always work that way.
No,
And I think everybody should really embrace this idea of talk to your manager and set goals and set expectations. How am I doing?
yeah,
What do I need to get to the next role? Can we set a time frame where we can have a conversation about actually making it happen once we start to see some of these things that we
yeah,
just discussed happen? Right. And it's kind of like being like taking that approach is more proactive, and it's going to help actually make that promotion happen more so than just sitting back and hoping good things will happen to you.
yeah,
I'm not saying that doesn't happen or never does happen, because it certainly does. But I think more often than not, being, advocating for yourself and asking questions and working with a manager to help set goals is going to be the best way to actually make promotions happen. And I think that certainly true. Like, the starting off in design, don't overthink it. Don't rush it. But everyone should really think about, how can I do a good job of advocating for myself in an appropriate way to make sure I'm getting to where I want to be.
yeah, yeah. I completely agree. I think it starts essentially when you're also interviewing for the role that you're looking for. I think it's just asking questions around what is expected of me, how is success measured in this role, and those are questions you should ask in the interview. But they're also questions as soon as you join. That's again, you revisit them straight away and say, well, look. I want to be here for the long run. Of course, I wouldn't have joined if not. I don't think anyone joins a company to be there for short periods of time. Well, they shouldn't anyway. um, but yeah, it's about understanding what you need to do to achieve your goals, but also align your goals with your manager's goals, with the wider business goals. Ensure they're realistic for one, and I think it's also about revisiting them as frequently as you can as well. Sometimes the initial goal that you set may have been too high. It might, things might have happened that may impact that goal in the long term. So it's, you need to constantly revisit them, make sure they are realistic, but also are challenging. You can always underset goals as well, make it too easy,
Yeah.
and then it becomes pointless at that point because you're not really pushing yourself to strive to be the best you can.
Yeah, and another thing, is I think, and this is I think really true as you start to look at more senior levels, but when you think about getting promoted, it's not only about, because I'm going to be at this new level, your expectations for me will change. I think it's
Yeah,
also, as part of this new level, here are additional responsibilities that I can take on.
yeah,
And I think it's a combination really of those two things. One, it's the expectation you're going to have, and probably even a little bit more important when you really get down into the business
yeah,
of what's behind a promotion, is how the role is going to expand or the role is going to change.
yeah,
And I think there's very often an opportunity for people, especially in more senior level roles, to identify things that they're not doing or the company's not doing and propose that we start doing those things, and here's why, or I start doing this
Yeah.
thing and here's why, because then you're coming to the table with a solution for how I can actually have more responsibility that's going to make a difference. And with that
Yeah.
comes the opportunity for promotion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, again, completely agree. I think coming to your manager, generally, I think most companies should have the company should have a clear career matrix defined. It doesn't happen all the time, as you said. I think in earlier stage startups, in earlier stage companies where things aren't quite as defined or structured and things like that, it's a little bit chaotic, as most startups are originally. That may be a case where you have to be proactive and sit down with your manager and say, look, I know there's nothing in place right now. However, I'd love to sit down with you and put this in place, put together some goals so I know what I need to do to achieve the X promotion. If the team gets to this capacity, I'd love to be in this position by the time it gets to that, etc., etc. But yeah, I think you do have to. I think coming with data as much as you can is super important to those types of meetings as well. People are busy. Generally, people in hiring positions are obviously responsible for quite a few people, and they have other responsibilities as well. So if you come to a promotion meeting and you feel like you're justified a promotion, make sure you do have some tangible things to come with. If you should keep track of your successes, keep track of the impacts you're having. As you said, if you've got new ideas to potentially move into more responsibilities, then make sure you have that clear, and make sure you can present that to the people that you're speaking about promotions wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, um, anything else to add on that topic, Ryan?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay, no worries. Now, the last part of this first topic that we wanted to cover off, Ryan, was obviously designers coming from different places, right? Now, I did software engineering recruitment for a little while. Traditionally, the path into software engineering is pretty standard, to be honest. There wasn't too many engineers that I spoke to that didn't do a computer science degree or something equivalent in university or college and then transition from there. There was the odd few, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But design, I think, is a very different concept. Obviously, being a very creative concept. I've certainly met a vast array of people that were doing something similar in a creative space, but some were. I've once placed a designer that was a lawyer before he did design.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, how do what would your advice be, and how would you think about switching into design from another industry if that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. So I've talked to a lot of people who are going through this and trying to figure it out. And there's always some type of carryover that lends itself to design. Um, Design is it's under where's the problem? Like, what's the problem, and how can we solve a problem through design? And if you're a lawyer, you've probably encountered several problems in your career as a lawyer. And so thinking about, well, how did I solve that problem? Maybe through
Yeah,
communicating with other people, but still it was identifying a problem and solving that problem, right? That does have a carryover into design. Or you became really good at, maybe you're really good at communicating and expressing complex points to people who might not have that technical or background, right? That makes you good at presenting. That makes you good at taking something complex and being able to boil it down for a client or a stakeholder or somebody on another team who might not be as familiar. I've talked to somebody who, I talked to somebody once who was like, I took a year. I was doing, I don't remember exactly what the person was doing, but they took a year off the world and lived in different cultures, and then they wanted to switch into design. I think there's something to that. You spent time in different cultures,
yeah,
learning about how people behave. That's really interesting for a designer. If you work on a project now and you understand how people think in different cultures, that's going to help influence how you approach a design, be it colors, be it wording you're using, different symbol shapes, patterns. So I think there's always an interesting carryover, and it's just a matter of asking yourself what are the things that I've done in the past that involved solving problems, communicating with other people, working collaboratively with other teams. And then it does become relevant to where you are as a designer. Now, you might have 10 years of experience doing one thing, right? And maybe during that time, you have a lot of corporate experience, and you've you're good at collaboration, you're good at pulling different teams together to
Yeah.
solve a problem, right? Incredibly relevant for design. It doesn't mean you're going to come in as a senior designer, but
Yeah.
you do have very tangible, relevant skills that would
Mm.
make you attractive to a hiring manager.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very subject to design and design as a function becoming certainly a lot more business focused, right, over the last 5, 10 years. I'm sure you'd agree, probably more, probably longer. But yeah, there's been a real shift, and a lot more companies are much more focused on. Yeah, I think there's definitely still room to go, but at least companies are having the understanding that design can be a function that adds great business value as opposed to just being a creative function and pushing pixels or making things
Yep.
look good, right?
So one story here is after I left Yahoo, and this is a long story, but I'm just going to make this really quick just to hit this
Yeah,
point.
sure.
I actually pivoted out of the design world, and I had an opportunity to help open a gym, a health club,
Yeah,
and I thought this was gonna, like a year or two, this thing gets built up. I could go, have a business running in the
yeah,
background, go back to design if I want to, and realize that it's really hard to be an entrepreneur and start a business, and it ended up
yeah,
taking a long time. But after like 3.5, 4 years, it was like I need to start I need to get back in. Like this isn't really working out, right? And I
yeah,
need to get back into design. This should be easy because I have a lot of experience doing it.
yeah,
And first, people didn't want to talk to me. And when they did want to talk to me and we're like, well, what have you been doing for the past 4 years or
yeah,
whatever it might be? And I would explain it, it would have like, I was not able to articulate it in a way where there was any carryover and it
yeah,
wasn't working well. And then it hit me one day. I had started a business. So for me, I just went to business school. It was like
yeah,
an MBA. I understand a lot about how businesses run. I understand a
yeah,
lot more about how businesses run now than I did 4 years ago. I know how to talk about that. I know how to communicate that. And when I started coming into interviews, explaining how much I've learned about business and how that is going to actually make me a better designer or a better design leader,
yeah,
it was quick sailing from that point on, right?
yeah,
And so it's really just finding that one theme or that one connection point that brings relevancy to what you want to do.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's 100%. I think, as you said, there's so many transferable skills from different industries, different backgrounds. You don't have to have come from a traditional graphic design or arts background in university, college, whatever it might be. There are, design is very quickly becoming a very influential business function. And you know, there's lots of skills that go into being or understanding how a business runs and how you can contribute to that. So yeah, I think it's just about understanding what value you can add from your understanding
Yeah.
of your skills right now. But again, it goes back to that curiosity, the eagerness to learn. Of course, there's many different disciplines. This is probably a conversation for another time, right? But of course, there's so many different disciplines within design now, so you don't have to be
Yeah.
incredibly creative or great in Figma and creating visuals. There's very
Sure.
strategic roles that now sit within design that obviously very business oriented people could fit
Yeah.
into. But again, probably a
100%.
topic for another day. Now,
Yeah.
moving very swiftly on to the next topic, Ryan. We wanted to talk about building motivated teams. Now, you've obviously built a few teams in your time as a design leader. Um, of course, you've also been through that transition of COVID time, everything switching to remote. Perhaps it's looking more coming back to more of a hybrid situation now. I know we were having a chat before we jumped on about this, but firstly, building a motivated team to start off with, regardless of whether it's remote or not. What do you feel like a motivated team should, what do you think they should feel like? What does a motivated team look like to you?
Yeah. I think a motivated team, they want to collaborate. They want to help each other solve problems. They're not selfish and they recognize that I'm working with other people who I could learn from. And you're able to laugh and have a good time while you do those things. And I think if those three things happen and people are laughing and having fun, then I think you probably are going to have a motivated team because people, designers want to be part of a community. And I think if you could build a strong community where people could be themselves and know that they have others who are going to help them out and support them, your team's going to be motivated.
Yeah,
People are going to be happier in their role because they're enjoying doing the work with the people that they're doing it with.
yeah, yeah. How have you dealt with? There's probably been scenarios in your past, but I'm interested to know how you've dealt with different types of personalities, different type of people who are motivated by different things. How do you go about firstly sort of understanding what different people are motivated by, and then obviously the actions that you sort of take after you've discovered how they're motivated?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're leading a team, I think one of the most important things that you can do, and one of the things you really have to focus on early on, are understanding what are the different personalities on the team, what makes these individual people on the team tick, because it's different for everyone. And you can't
Yeah,
come in with one communication style, right? You have to kind of tailor that based on who you're talking to, and let those people understand, like, I understand, like, I get who you are. I'm gonna communicate with you in the right way, and that's not something you have to talk about, it's just something
yeah,
that should happen, but also understand where that person ultimately wants to be, and I think as a good leader, it's your job to help position those people so they're in the right place at the right time, and you're there to support them.
sure. Understand.
And
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's like, that's human nature, like,
yeah,
everyone on your team is they're gonna have different personalities, and you need to work with those. And the other piece of it is be honest with people, and be transparent. And I think one of the hardest things for a leader to do is have a difficult conversation with somebody about something that could be improved. I think a lot of people
yeah,
shy away from that, but I think if you could deliver the message in the right way, people at the end of the day do appreciate it,
yeah,
because you're only giving them that feedback because you're trying to help them become a better professional.
yeah. Yeah, I think as you said, those conversations as a leader, manager, anyone really, when you're talking about someone's improvement, it can be a difficult task. But I think if you do a good enough job to understand their personality, how they react in different scenarios, the way you deliver it can be different to other people. Some people can take it very easily. If you're quite straightforward and blunt with it and say, look, this needs to improve. This is how we're going to do it. People react very well to that. Some others will take that to heart, and it won't. Then their motivation will drop, and then you'll have further problems down the line. Um, when you talk about understanding people's obviously personality and motivations, as a leader, do you understand, or is there correlation between trying to identify their work motivations as well as their personal motivations as well?
I think it's both.
Yeah,
I really think it's both. I mean, the work motivations I think are the things that you can directly help somebody with, and I think the personal motivations, you should be there to support, what those are, and if there's anything you can do to help that person achieve those things, you should do it. But that's really, at the end of the day, that's on them. And where somebody, like, what somebody's interests are, where they want to be in their career, where they want to be personally. When you're a manager, you should be somebody who's there to listen and give advice, but ultimately it's up to that person to make those things happen. You
yeah,
can't force somebody to read content, to go to conferences, to listen to podcasts, to do some of the extra things that get you ahead. Like, that's on you, and it's on you to understand, what those things are and what am I really interested in. And I think some people, especially younger designers, come into it thinking, well, I'm going to report to somebody or have a manager, and they're just going to tell me all these things. And
yeah,
I think that that's a mistake, because
yeah,
if somebody comes in, I'm like, here's the things that you're going to be interested in terms of what you want to do in your career, and here's the things you should be thinking about professionally outside of work. Then I'm telling you things that I think are important to
yeah,
me. It doesn't necessarily mean
yeah,
they're important to you. And so I think it's really like getting to where you want to be. That's on you.
yeah,
That's on you. A good manager will help guide you
yeah,
to get to
yeah.
that place.
Yeah, definitely. One of the other episodes where I spoke to Dane Howard on, we were talking about the difference between mentoring and managing your team at work, but also mentoring and managing individuals outside, through ADP list or something
Yeah.
similar.
Right.
And I think everyone, especially juniors, should seek out someone as a mentor outside of if they've got a job or not. Try and seek out a mentor that's going to have some one-to-one time with you, because as much as you as a design leader want to spend as much one-on-one time with everyone, of course you've got to balance your time strategically, and you've got your own time to think about. But having that dedicated person to spend that one-on-one time will definitely be able to enhance your career, and take you to the level you want to get to.
Yeah. And I mean, ADP list is fantastic.
Yeah,
For anyone who's not on ADP list or looking at it, you should be, because
yeah, go get on it.
you have access to so many people with varying levels of experience from
Yeah,
different backgrounds and different companies, and they're willing to set aside time to talk to you and to answer your questions and
yeah,
give you a different perspective. It's a great way to network, and it's really a great way
yeah.
to learn.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, there's people of all experience levels on there. So, if you're a junior looking to make your way up to mid-level senior, there's mid-level seniors that are on there that you can talk about how they did it with their journey, what they did, what they found difficult, how they overcame challenges. Again, similar. I think, Dane is VP of design, similar, level to yourself, Ryan, and
Yeah.
he still seeks mentorship to this day, and I'm sure you do as well. Because there's always things you can learn, always new experiences, different viewpoints, different opinions that will help you create a bit better outlook on yourself and on your own job as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I still seek out people who I can go to for
Yeah,
career advice and really listen to what they're saying because they also have a lot more experience or more experience.
yeah,
Um, and I also do like I'm also on ADP lists. I also do some mentoring on ADP lists, and
yeah,
it's always great to hear, you know, where are people like where's the problem? Like where are
yeah,
people challenging and kind of here's something I went through,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
That's kind of similar, and here's how I got through it. So I
Yeah,
think thinking about being a mentor and always understanding there's people out there who can mentor you regardless of where you are in your career. That's hugely important.
yeah, completely agree. Now, last thing we just wanted to cover off, Ryan, obviously was obviously we've covered off building or what a motivated team looks like. Now, ever since, of course, there was still remote work was still happening before COVID. Obviously, it was a lot less known about and a lot less popular. But since COVID, pretty much everything switched to remote for a long time. We are seeing, I think we both agreed before the call, and certainly I'm seeing with a lot of the positions that are open right now, is that companies are pushing more towards bringing people back to the office at least 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Most commonly, I've seen Tuesday to Thursday as those days that people come in. Monday and Friday, the days off, but that's most common sort of hybrid working model that I've seen. Now, obviously, you've built teams and managed teams during both periods during transition and things like that. How have you managed both sides of it? When people are in the office full time or most of the time versus people being 100% remote and keeping them motivated.
I mean, I think a lot of the core principles are the same in terms of what you want to do. And this is something coming into Priceline. That was actually something I was a little bit concerned about.
Yeah,
Because it was in office and COVID happened and I was taking over a new team and there had been turnover on that team. And so I was like, okay, well, being in the office is going to be really important. Pandemic hits, and all of a sudden, everyone is remote. And like I said earlier, designers, researchers, whatever it might be, is you like to be part of a community, and part of that is getting people to know each other and to respect one another, and intentionally finding ways to make that happen. So one of the interesting things that happened during that time, I think, that the team actually like got closer and better collaborating by being remote. And I realized we were all kind of going through a very unique situation, which in a lot of ways I think pulled people together. But
yeah,
being remote did force us to really think about how we collaborate and how we work together. One of the things that I did, and one of the things that I like to do, is set up time to get people on the team together and not make it about work.
yeah,
It's happy hour, play games. We've done, watch a movie and get everyone together and do a movie review, similar to what
yeah,
you would do at a book club. But it's intentionally finding those moments to get people together and
uh,
bond and connect and get to know one another. Because the more that happens, the more people start to be able to rely on one another and respect one another.
mm,
And there's trust, right?
yeah,
And you get that, and then all of a sudden the work improves. You start to see more messages
yeah,
going into Slack about, hey, I need help with
yeah,
this one design. Is someone available to jump in and help me? Or people, hey, like, here's something I'm seeing that I think we could change or do better. Like you
yeah,
see collaboration start to improve as people start to feel like it's more of this community type of space. So I think that's one thing. And I think a lot of the principles that go into that are the same whether you're in the office or you're remote. I think it's
mm,
it's finding those opportunities to do just that. And as the leader, and we've talked about some of this, but it's being human, being empathetic, understanding who the various people are on your team, and what are the what should I talk to them about? What are the things that I
Mm.
should be bringing up or doing to try to proactively help position this person to be in the right place?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think what was missed heavily over the COVID period was obviously that social engagement. And I think a lot of trust is built during those social engagements in a working team, right? I think,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, day-to-day work, obviously collaborating, working alongside your peers and getting good work done, of course, builds trust from that perspective. But that social element of that, it's a different type of rapport, it's a different type of relationship. And often that type of relationship is built over a beer after work or a coffee at lunch, or just little small social interactions that do get missed during um, being in the office together. But I really like what you said about trying to dedicate some time to get the team together to just not talk about work, because I think that's what a lot of companies fell into the trap of. Was yes, they figured out how to collaborate and sort of very strategically structure the day so that everyone communicate with each other, and Slack channels blew up and everything like
yeah,
that, right? But actually getting together and just speaking about things that aren't about work, I think a lot of companies didn't do enough and didn't really, as much as I think it's difficult because planned fun is never the best fun ever, but it's a substitution for, especially during COVID when everyone was actually in lockdown, it's probably the best alternative. How have you, just very quickly, Ryan, how have you found because I know you mentioned that Priceline have obviously gone through, going back to some more days in the office of recent. I think it's common across the market that this is happening. How have you found the reaction generally across the board to that push back to the office now?
yeah. I think people got really comfortable
Yeah.
working at home and realize in a lot of cases, hey, this time that I'm not commuting, I'm getting more done, or I have time in the
Mm.
morning to do something which is should be part of my morning routine, whatever. So I think at first it was change. No one likes change. So first
Yeah.
coming back to the office was like, oh man, this is I don't think it was that by a lot of people not that welcomed.
Yeah.
Um, I think once people got in and started doing it, people realized, wow, like this isn't that bad.
Yeah.
I'm getting to talk to people
Yeah.
in person that I don't get to see
Yeah.
that often. I think one of the other things that happen is when you're at home and you're on Zoom, you kind of build up for lack of a better word, like your Zoom bubble. Like
Yeah.
these are the people who you collaborate on with Zoom. And when you go back into the office and you start to realize, hey, there's somebody else who's working on something similar as I am, or somebody else I should be talking to, it kind of opens up that network a little bit more. And I think you
Yeah.
naturally start meeting people who you should be collaborating with, who
Yeah.
you wouldn't previously because they're not in that
Yeah.
Zoom circle. So I do
The
think,
immediate vicinity. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in all honesty, when when the decision was made that we're going to be returning to the office, I thought, man, like I'm happy. Like I like this remote setup that I have,
Mm.
but I was open minded about it for sure. And what I've
Yeah.
learned over time doing it is going into the office 2 days a week, not bad at all. And
Yeah.
it's actually it's nice being in the office, and it's nice being able to see people and collaborate with people
Mm.
in person. So I think I think a lot of people went from, "Man, we're doing a change. This isn't gonna be good," to getting in and doing it,
Yeah.
to that mood kind of changing to, "This isn't that bad," or, "I
Yeah.
like this," or, "I see that there's actually some real benefit
Yeah.
in spending
Yeah.
that time together."
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of people I've spoken to have certainly opened up their mind to the possibility of going back in a little bit more. Some still are completely against it. They're too comfortable in their position, and it's fair enough. If you get used to it for so long and it's what you love doing and where you want to stay, I think there's still enough remote opportunity out there.
Right?
But I wouldn't be surprised if those remote opportunities do start to decrease over the next year or so.
I mean, I think that's probably what's gonna happen, and the
Yeah.
other thing people have to remember, it wasn't too long ago when coming into the office 5 days a week, that was the
Yeah.
expectation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was it, so you
Exactly.
didn't
Yeah.
know anything different, and when
Yeah.
that was happening at the time, it's what you were doing, it's what you were used to, so
Yeah.
it was just yeah, like, I go to the office Monday through Friday, that's
Yeah.
what you do, and
Yeah.
then culture started to slowly change a little bit over time,
Yeah.
but I think there is, like I do think we've adapted in a lot of ways for the better.
Mm.
I mean, I personally think hybrid is great.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't, I think being in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week, I think that's a really good balance. And I also
Yeah.
think that for a lot of people, there's just something really, there could be something really, really good and meaningful about having that freedom to work at home. So, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that this is actually a really good evolution to how
Yeah.
we're working.
Yeah. No, I agree. Cool. Well, look, Ryan, thanks for all your time. I've got one
Sure.
final question to ask you that I'm asking
Yeah.
every guest on the on
Yeah.
this podcast. Now, in an ideal world, if you did have if you did have the freedom to pick and choose, that I usually ask, I've asked the last two guests about unlimited budget, time, and resources. They've both said that it's quite difficult if that is the case because they're used to having restrictions on things. But look, just in an ideal scenario, it doesn't have to be about size necessarily. I'm more interested in what your thought is in terms of if you could build the perfect design team, what would it look like and why?
So I'm not just saying this to win points for anyone who might be watching, but I think the team that we have right now and the people that I'm working with right now pretty much to me sum up what the perfect design team would look
Yeah,
like. I think it's a really good group of people who are smart and talented and they're collaborative and they like to work together and they want to learn from one another and they have a good time while they're doing it. And to me, that's perfect. That's a design community right there. And it's the type of community that I think people would really want to be a part of. And it's a team I think people would really enjoy working on. So I would say that. I would say if there's no, budget constraints, like a time, not so worried about time. If there was, if there was budget constraints, sure. I think you can always use another person or two. Because there's always a lot of stuff that you want to get done that you just can't
yeah,
you can't get done. And sometimes if you have that extra person, two people, and think about what a team structure would look like, then maybe you could start focusing on or getting to some of these side things that could actually make a positive impact for the business that could be driven by design that you're not typically able to get to.
awesome. Well, look, thanks very much for all your time, Ryan. Super appreciative of you jumping on. Yeah, everyone, Ryan's LinkedIn profile will be tagged in this podcast episode, so make sure you go follow him on LinkedIn. Ryan, you've got a design event community coming up if you wanted to share that with everyone as well.
Yeah, so this coming Tuesday, February 6th at the Priceline office in the Empire State Building, we are partnering with UXDX. We're going to be having a meetup for the tech and product community. We have some great speakers lined up talking about server-driven UI, and we're going to have a panel on the use of AI and product development. So I think it's just for anyone in the New York area, I think it's just a good opportunity to learn and network with others. And we could drop, if it's okay, we could drop a link
Yeah,
for that.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, definitely drop that link as well. Thanks very much, Ryan.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Speak soon.
All right, appreciate it.